nobody told me that you could just make money and invest with somebody else. I was not, I don't know if I wasn't smart enough or wasn't exposed to it, but I thought you had to make millions of dollars to even be involved in real estate. So I said, well, shoot, I'm going to do that because that's how much I wanted to be there. I believe who you spend your time with is who you're going to become. You trend exactly, the average of those people.
But let's definitely hear some of your story. I know your story, obviously, but you've been an entrepreneur at heart for a very long time. You're one of those people who pretty much fell out of the womb as an entrepreneur, it feels like. So you've done a lot of things over the years, and eventually you found your way into the world of commercial real estate. But tell us a little about your story. Where'd you start? How'd you end up in the world of real estate? I'd love to just hear you unpack that for us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I fell into the world in the midst of entrepreneurs. So it's always that kind of joke of like you stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We all do, right? The previous generations. So my family is honestly just a bunch of Italian immigrants that came from Italy in the middle of the Great Depression. So I was raised around these people. And it was entrepreneurial, mindset and concepts and focuses were something that were very a part of my family forever. I grew up, my dad was eventually a Fortune 500 CEO. So I had this one side of a grandfather who was Great Depression era, who I spent an insane amount of time with and taught me timeless lessons of frugality and strategy and grit and these really amazing lessons from that time period all the way to a father who, he still is. I mean, he's probably the best deal maker I've ever met in my entire life. Just a natural born, immigrant mentality, hard work, all those things. So it was amazing. So that said, kind of my story was growing up around that everything was a negotiation, right? So growing up, I now have a ton of kids taking on that Italian mantle of, we have two, we have a third on the way. I don't know when we'll stop, but we'll get there when we get there. And so I do the same thing to my kids is there's negotiation involved in discussion, right? Because it's the old concept that you get what you earn, but you also get what you negotiate, right? And there's this concept that was passed down to me is that there's things that you need to navigate through, right? Negotiation isn't just this gridlock of wills and whoever's bigger ego wins. It's navigating your life, right? It's working through situations and finding win-wins. And every discussion that I dreaded as a kid was with a grandfather or a dad or other family members where there was like different negotiations involved. And as an adult, that gave me the ability to be very comfortable and very confident working through complicated, sometimes high pressure situations. So started work very early, very, very crappy jobs, construction and things like that. So I knew, the entrepreneur side and moving towards that side was going to be my focus. Because I did all the crappy jobs. I did construction for many years. I built walls, my hands bled. I scanned papers and was the bottom of the totem pole at different financial institutions. And I said, I can do it better. I can do it myself. So when I graduated college, I paid my way through college in the music industry. So kind of like always around the entrepreneurial side. During college, I had some family members that had real estate. And I just said, look, I was very clear that I wanted to be around successful people and help them out however I could and just absorb that, even if it was for free or for very little. So I started doing marketing for that. I said, this real estate thing, there's a lot of money in it. These guys seemed really smart, really switched on. And the lifestyle of leaving for periods of time and having, these cash flowing investments that still appreciate and have tax benefits, that sounds too good to be true. So I started doing marketing for them and I was paying most of my bills in the music industry. And then the Great Recession happened and everything hit a wall. And so while I was, traveling around and doing music and doing this, I saw these lifestyles change very dramatically. And that these, where once people were essentially pissing money away, right? Spending huge amounts of money on anything and everything, that ground to a halt. And I saw that in real time. And I said, first off, I didn't love the music industry. I liked it. And, it was not something I was married to. But I said, I need to change my life immediately and adapt to this new environment. So I knew I wanted to go into real estate at that point, but I was broke because I was in college. I only had 20, 30 grand saved up, and that was from living a very frugal life. Like we're talking, a cup of noodles for every meal, right? So started an ATM company. That grew, that exposed me to new industries, being in finance. And eventually then I started a second company from there. We ended up growing that very successfully into a multi-state, very large company where we were peaking at doing about $1 million a month in sales. which I was in my mid to late 20s at this time. And this was my first high level experience in business. On one side, I kept in touch with the real estate entrepreneurs and the people doing this, but I was running this company full time. I was making a ton of money. It was very successful, with the goal of eventually selling this company or making enough money to invest in real estate. Because I didn't know that there was another way to invest in real estate. Nobody told me that you could just make money and invest with somebody else. I don't know if I wasn't smart enough or wasn't exposed to it, but I thought you had to make millions of dollars to even be involved in real estate. So I said, well, shoot, I'm going to do that because that's how much I wanted to be there. But what that led to was something amazing. I learned a ridiculous amount. We had 40 something employees, at any given time. We're doing 7 figures a month in sales, multi-state, lots of planes, lots of meetings, writing legislation with different states and counties and cities and doing all these different exciting things. But I was working like 100-hour weeks. Most nights were 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night. I was boiling over with stress, right? And it took that at that time. It really required that. But then I hit a point where I said, I'm actually early on with business, you put your head down and you just grind it out until it hits a sustainable point where you can bring on other people. And beyond that, it's your fault. You're really grinding yourself to death. But I woke up with a set of issues that I wasn't ready for, right? I had the money set up. What I didn't have was the relationship with the person that I thought I was going to marry and have a lifetime with, and children and family. That had degraded almost to zero. That was falling apart, and that was on the rocks. My relationship with friends and family, I didn't see them. I didn't keep in touch. I was just working. And then the real breaking point for me at that point was I had a really big health scare. I had something come up that was terrifying. And I was relatively healthy. I mean, I spent all my entire 20s going to the gym very regularly, eating very, healthy foods, all organic, blah, blah, blah. And I still had this health scare that was very clearly drawn directly from the stress that I was going through. So I sat down and I just was like, the money's there. The monetary piece is there, but, my family and friends are not there. My relationship's about to fail. Thank God it did. God bless that person and she's amazing, but, it really was for the best. But something that I thought I really wanted was falling apart. And then third, even my health. And all 3 of those things, growing up with a tight-knit family, having a relationship for a long term that I put a lot of time into, my health falling apart was just absolutely, a really brutal situation. So I was smart enough and lucky enough, both at the time, that our business was really lumpy earlier on. And I said, look, I'm going to go insane trying to chase these lumps and ride these waves. I need to invest on the side. So what I did, keeping in touch and being involved with those real estate guys on the side, was some projects came up through my company and I said, these are good opportunities. Okay. So I rounded up the people I'd worked with. At this point, they were pretty successful. And I said, I have the inside track. I know what's going on with these deals. I know these are good opportunities. I know they're off market. If we raise this, $10+ million, we could strategically pick up these properties in key markets. And these are the drivers of these, and they're going to have good returns. And I, went to these investors. It was probably simultaneously the easiest sale and also the biggest opportunity at the same time. So it's not hard to sell someone when the drivers are so good, right? And the timing's so good. But also I had the relationships built up with successful, established, wealthy individuals that were looking for deals, right? So those were pre-established, and that's something that came into my mind later on too. But we went forward with those deals, and they ended up being huge successes, things that we still have in the portfolio today that are paying 50 cash on cash every year, right? Like, how do you get, things like that? And so long story short, by the time all these huge issues came up, health problems, relationship problems, family problems, no friendships, things like that, it was this thing where I sat down and I had like a breaking point. I said, I need to analyze my income. I need to analyze my lifestyle. There has to be a better way to put all this together. I can't do this. I'm going to die, or I'm going to be very unhappy, or I'm going to have this doesn't trend where I want my life to go. So I analyzed my income, and I had been putting so much money into real estate, investing, living frugally, investing, that I woke up and I said, it actually turned out at that point that over 80% of my income was coming from real estate at that time. But 100 hours a week, 90+ hours a week, I was putting towards this other company. And I was just funneling everything, over to the real estate side. And so I did that math and I was like, this is insane. Why am I doing this to myself, right? So had a meeting with the management. We all decided and voted that it was a great company. Some people would stay with the company. Some people would go with me to then found State Investment Group and kind of moved that direction. And we split the company, we sold it off. I took every dollar and just really went all in on real estate, being like, if we're making that much from real estate without a full effort, why don't we do this full time? Because we could do so much, multiply that success and bring in investors that were in our situation. So kind of like I joke by saying real estate saved my life at that stage, but in a way, it's really not a joke. It's very, very serious that I needed a major life change. I made some good decisions that were 50% luck and 50% strategy at that time, and it really paid off. So that's kind of my background, how I got into real estate and my, entrepreneurial background. So that community, the business owners, the entrepreneurs, everything from solopreneurs to the multinationals, like those, I love being around that crowd. I love the sophistication, amount of information they need to process and the innovation they need regularly. So, dude, those are my people, right? Those are my people.
Definitely. That's a great intro, and I love your story too, man. It's really inspiring, and I definitely want to circle back on the point of, do you have any words of advice for people who might be going through difficult situations like that in terms of how to deal with it, how to navigate it? Anything you might be able to share there that would be helpful would be amazing.
Yeah, I would say, I'll give you 2 points that were really, really, really important to me. The first is clarity, okay? Clarity of intent. What are you trying to achieve, right? And that sounds dumb, and it's totally played out. I hear that saying all the time, but it's also misunderstood, and I think misexplained oftentimes is, what are you trying to do then? To me, the point was to get to real estate. The point was to get to investing. Investing side, my goal was that every hour or every effort or every whatever dollar that I put into something would make exponentially more on the back end. That's why I did everything I did. So when I woke up in a position where I was like, now I'm paying a bigger bill than I'm getting back, right? I'm paying a bigger check than the meal that I ate, or I put too much in and I'm not getting the juice for that squeeze anymore. That was very clear to me once I understood that, but it took me a while to get there. Understanding very clearly what you're trying to achieve, because there's a period in business, especially early on, I think I said this already, but it's just like kind of shut up and get back to work. You're telling that to yourself, right? It's just like, there's no one else to do it. It's you looking in the mirror, just saying like, look how bad you want it. But after that period, especially if the business has reached a level of success, you need to build in strategies and systems to level up beyond that. Because if you're stuck in a low level system and you're doing the lower level things, the company can't grow beyond you doing low level things. It's you are the bottleneck, right? So for a lot of reasons, it's understanding clarity and understanding kind of that value of what you're trying to achieve. The second is the network side is insane. And I don't say network like, I think people think you get freebies from your network like that. It's like, your network is your net worth. And if you just know the right people, they give you free stuff, that the biggest value I've got has been, and again, I'm part of every freaking entrepreneur group that I could find. Seriously, I'm part of Raise Master Band, an amazing group focused on a really good topic. So I join groups that I'm interested in, but the feedback you get from people. So you talk about a problem, hey, I'm just kind of dealing with this. You'll get feedback from, 5, 6, 7 entrepreneurs. And you're like, oh my God, I'm solving the wrong problem here. Or my strategy's way off. Or I didn't even think about that. Or wait, I could just call this person and pay them X amount of money and they essentially solve this problem for me, right? Like, these are amazing opportunities to have. So between those two things, building a network of successful people, and then the other side is being insanely clear on where you're going and what you're trying to achieve, that's the advice I'd give for people. The other problems seem to fall away if you have the resources and the direction.
Yeah, clarity of intent is huge. I literally just discussed this with one of my mentors just the other day, and it's one of those things that seems like it's a common sense sort of thing, but there are so many people that are on cruise control, myself at times too. Like, it's one of those things you kind of need to be reminded of it every now and then to really make sure that you got the right North Star and that you're aiming at the right thing. So yeah, that's huge and super smart. And when it comes to raising capital, so you had mentioned some of the group that you joined. This is something that I've noticed about you, is that your network is amazing. And when it comes to raising capital, because you spend so much time and effort cultivating an amazing network, you're able to tap into that network and raise capital from it. So talk to us a little bit about what your favorite strategies are for raising capital. It feels like that's a part of it, but how do you go about, kind of curating what groups you want to join? That sort of thing. Like, maybe just tell us a little bit about like what you actually do in terms of like getting into some of these social circles and joining some of these groups. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, so the capital raising side it's a big space, right? And there's groups like Raise Masters you could be part of that, connect you with a lot of people with a lot of different strategies. So I will stay in my lane with the things that I know, very well, because there's many strategies. We do we probably do 3 or 4 funnels that are very successful for us today. But the funnel that you're talking about, kind of like, it's much less of a strategic paid advertisement funnel and much more of a long tail, long relationship and network building that it really juices everything up. So I'm happy to talk about that. That's something that's passionate to me, right? Without a doubt, without a question, I believe who you spend your time with is who you're going to become. You trend exactly, the average of those people. So I grew up and I saw that very clearly with friends of mine that went down one way and I went down another, or, different people doing different things where they landed. So I just was like, well, if that's the case, here's what I know about myself. I have to eat. I have to go to the gym, right? I have to socialize with somebody, right? I want to think and discuss and learn. So if I want to do all those things, do I want to do that with this crowd or this crowd, right? And so I was like, if I'm going to do all those things, I want to do it with the best possible people I can that are the most successful, the most happy. I joke with friends and family and be like, hang out with anybody. If there's anybody you ever see me with, they are world class at something. Not everything. Nobody's world class at everything. But I have friends that are just so spiritually, incredibly, intellectual and understanding, and or how deeply religious or deeply, financially through to the moon, or politically plugged in and understand that business completely differently. And so I wanted to be around those people. So there's a lot you can do to find those groups and those people and be a part of them. It's 100% public knowledge, but nobody understands that. Nobody drills down, right? So I spent probably a year, literally a year, saying like, look, we sold these companies, the real estate side's good, but I really wanted to relook at my entire life and just say, where do I want to go and who do I want to spend time with? So I found and identified the groups in my area that were successful. I found the entrepreneur groups. I wanted to be around like-minded people at the same stage or that were slightly ahead of me, right? Because those are conversations sometimes where you have a conversation with somebody that's 20 years ahead. There's a little bit of a miscue as far as their understanding, because their experiences at a different stage and even their values at that stage are differently. But finding people at your level or slightly above, super valuable. So that was the first, is the entrepreneur groups. And then the other is I wanted to hang out with people that were world-class and just world-class crowd, world-class, politics, wealth, etc. So I found in my city that there were 2 clubs where wealthy people spent a lot of time. And, just to give you an example, these clubs took, I think, 3 references. So I had to meet 3 people through these clubs, spend time with them enough for them to give me a reference, and then pay a huge check up front and then pay monthly fees to these clubs. Okay. So it took me a year to do this. But on the back end, like this Tuesday, I think, I'm sitting down, a friend of mine sends me a text. He says, hey, I'm putting on an economic forum, just a couple dozen people. It's a really interesting crowd. You should be there. I said, sure, no problem. I'll throw on a suit. I'll see you there. So I show up, I'm hanging out with 2 or 3 ex-mayors, multiple politicians, several billionaires in the room. My buddy who gave the presentation is a bank CEO, set a lot of records in the banking industry. Sitting down to guys that are saying, oh, I was at lunch with Larry Fink last week, the CEO of BlackRock, right? The buddy that threw it, he's friends with Jerome Powell, right? So the access that these people have is ridiculous. And I'm sitting there like in shock half the time. I'm just like, I'm not sure if I should even be in this room. I feel like I'm like way outclassed, but I'm still going to push myself to be around those people. Because the amount that you learn, just the way that you absorb things from them and how they think, it's completely different. Having a steak with somebody and be like, hey, what are you doing this time? I think I'm going to go to F1 in Monaco. I got pit passes if you want to stop by. I'm like, stop by? Sure. Like, I guess I'll see you in Monaco for F1, right? And that's not my reality. That's not what I grew up with. That was not my experience. So pushing and spending the time, now it's a few years down the line that I've put that effort towards that. Those are relationships that are amazing people. They want what's best for the world. They want what's best for their friends. They want what's best for their families. They eat, they go to the gym, they think, they want to talk to friends also. You might as well be part of that circle. So that's kind of that was my like thesis for that, of like how to build the network. And now it's just that I feel very abundant and blessed that I'm surrounded by great friends that are doing amazing things that I get to just learn from and be around. So that was a long effort on my part, but it's something I'm really happy I did and spent the time doing. Being in the fund space and raising money and being around investments, it's like fuel to the fire. It's like these are the crowd that give you heads ups on what they think the economy has coming up, what they think of inflation, what they think the Fed's going to do. Things that are conversations you can't find on YouTube, conversations you can't find even from economic forums, right? So it's invaluable and it's more achievable than people think. But it takes that clarity of intent and finding the group, being involved and saying, I want to be here and I want to be around these people and, kind of pushing forward on that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love you. You think, I can tell you think very big when it comes to relationships, which is amazing. I think people are going to learn a ton from this conversation. And it sounds like some groups have been pretty influential on you. We've talked about Raise Masters. We talked about one of the local groups that you just mentioned. Are there any other organizations that you've been aligned with that it's like, holy cow, like, that particular one was impactful? Any just kind of thoughts or recommendations on some of these entrepreneur groups or some of the things you've been involved with that have really helped you to kind of push forward?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an open book. So the entrepreneur group that I referenced was called EO. It's Entrepreneurs Organization. So simply put, it's founders and co-founders that are part of this group. So everybody's a little more creative. Everybody's a little more innovative thinking. And if you're part of like the Traction group or EOS, it's this visionary integrator. It's like all those people in the same room. So it's amazing. There's 20,000 members worldwide or whatever. So any city I'm in, I could send out a text in a Slack or a text or whatever, get a reference for somebody and basically have dinner with like really successful, great people, right? Another group I'm considering joining is called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, an amazing group. They're kind of like cousin organizations. Very, very, very high-end, revered group. Again, you guys can Google these. Check these out, please, to understand that these groups exist for people. In my local city, the clubs that are very difficult to get into, that take references, lots of cash, but have these great events where people can network and are very high-end, are Pacific Club and Balboa Bay Club. That's just in Newport Beach, California. That's the local ones, but these are nationwide. Every city in the country has these groups where people get together and talk about money and wealth and family and how to give back to the community and lots of philanthropy. And so that's a full transparency. Those are my best recommendations for groups in my area, although different cities are going to have different things.
Yeah, that's super helpful advice. And to start to change the direction here a little bit, one thing that a lot of investors are super interested in right now, Nick, is what's going to happen in the future, right? It feels like we are entering a little bit of a turbulent time in the markets right now. Things don't feel quite as strong as they did maybe 12 to 18 months ago when people were riding high and these deals were going full cycle in 18 months and the market was pretty frothy and pretty crazy. What do you see in the future? When you kind of look out the next couple of years here, do you think inflation is going to be persistent? Do you think inflation is going to be a big problem for the next 10 years or so? Like what do you see on the horizon, just economically speaking and with inflation in particular?
So I geek out on two subjects more than any others, and it's geopolitics and economics. Those are like my geeky dorky. I'm reading books. I'm seeing the latest trends. I'm reading the latest data, reports that would put anybody else to sleep, right? But for some reason, this is interesting to me. But so inflation is weird, right? Inflation is very weird right now. I see three drivers for inflation, and I see the geopolitics of that being part of it. I see, first off, COVID. There's a lot of things known about that that's kind of front and center. I see international issues. So COVID, international issues, and the third being domestic drivers. Those are the biggest things that are affecting inflation. COVID is just, it was kind of an anomaly. It was unplanned, obviously. But you look at any supply chain, right? Most people say, oh, it's the supply chain, What does that even mean with COVID? Well, what it means is that consumer demand shifts very quickly during a COVID period, right? Or it did during the COVID period. In the middle of 2022, mid-2022, we hit 9% inflation, right? 9%. We haven't seen that in so long, it's crazy. So why did that happen? Because when consumers change their demands and what they want, it takes the manufacturing and the supply chain and logistics and distribution about 18 to 24 months to start, adjusting and absorbing those costs and bringing costs and efficiency back down, or efficiency up and cost down, right? So COVID, if you think about the middle of 2022, that's about 18 to 24 months after closures, and then full closures, and then masking, and then we had some openings, and then we had reclosures, and then, the zigging is that the work from home movement. Are you buying a new car? Are you not? Are you selling your car because you're working from home and don't need it? Are you buying a laptop or a desktop, right? Are you buying a dog? Are you moving? Are you having more kids? Like, all things during COVID that were rapidly changing. So middle of 2022 is about 18 to 24 months after that. In my opinion, today's inflation that we're seeing is just the tail end of COVID. I think it's going to continue to tick down from COVID. Internationally, a little more complex. We're dealing with Russia and Ukraine, right? We're dealing with really complex issues there, like the fact that Russia and Belarus are huge exports, right? Ukraine has huge agricultural exports. Russia has tons of natural resources that are essentially offline in the geopolitical sphere we're in, right? So like those are huge drivers. You look at China, their population's aging rapidly, right? Right now, here's something most people don't know. Right this second, as we sit in this interview, Mexico has a cheaper labor rate per hour than China. Right this second, right?
Wow.
And on top of that, it's expected that if you calculate in all the costs of Mexico versus China, that China is 3 times more expensive than Mexico. Mexico is our southern border. They're right next door to us. I'm in Southern California. Half of Southern California speaks Spanish, right? So it is even culturally overlapping in a big way. These are huge drivers. China is essentially the manufacturer of the world as it stands today. But their labor rate, they have so many people that are aging out. In the next 30 years, their population is going to be cut in half by people dying, being out of the work pool. So that is labor inflation, which then passes on to us as consumers, right? And then domestic drivers. In the US, it's an interesting story. We have the baby boomers, the most wealthy, the largest generation we have ever had in the United States developed history, by far, right? Baby boomers came of age after World War II. They basically got to step into an economy where the US was the leader in every category, but we were the leader of the world. And so because of that, there's tons of wealth, there's tons of focus, there's the reserve currency status that nobody even questioned the US dollar. So now the baby boomers, something interesting is happening. So in the US, from the age of 55 to 65 is the wealthiest you're ever gonna be on average. Because at 55, at around 50, 55, your biggest expenses go away. Your kids leave the house, right? And then all of a sudden you have all this money that's freed up. So what do you do with it? We start, usually, most people start paying down their mortgage into their biggest asset that most people in the US will ever own, which is their home. So all of a sudden they have the highest income of their career in that 55 to 65 age. Their biggest expense just left the house. And then their biggest asset they're paying down their bills on, so that it's big. Most people have it free and clear or almost by the time they turn 65. So what did we have the last 10 years in the US? We had the cheapest money and capital that we've ever had in the history of the United States. It was like they were giving away money, right? I was getting called from the bank for huge lines of credit that I didn't even apply for. Hey, we just pre-approved you. Would you like this right now? I don't know. I don't know if I want to take free money. And so on the side of that is now it's changed. The baby boomers are aging out. Last year, on average, the average age of baby boomers is above 65. So now they're entering retirement. So that money that was very hungry money, hey, we need returns. We're still in the workforce. We're still on the hunt for returns. That money's going away. That money's shifting to different things like fixed income investments, really safe investments, cash, God forbid, right? Things that are very, very secure, maybe a lot less stocks, maybe a lot more like bond type strategies. So that's what we're seeing. The expectation, if you look at that, is that, and then the third piece is that there's the Gen Zs coming in and the baby boomers are aging out. The differential between that, the biggest generation of all time, and Gen Z, who's not only our smallest generation we've ever had in our developed US, but also are the lowest labor participation rate we've ever had. So the differential of jobs is about 500,000 a year today. And that will peak in 2034 for 1 million people difference. That's baby boomers leaving the workforce and Gen Z entering. The difference will be up to 1 million people in a decade.
Wow.
So all of those are extremely inflationary. Less capital in the markets means higher cost of capital, or labor rates going way up caused by less people in the workforce and less people to replace those people, and also less people working, right? So all of those things, super inflationary. I've heard, to drill down on numbers, I've heard people make the argument that if cost of capital was about 3% at its lowest, a 5x increase, that puts cost of capital like 15%. I don't know if I stick there, but I've heard a strong argument for it. I probably think we're going to have sticky inflation for the next decade for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of very inflationary factors that you pointed to for sure. And it's logical to me that some of those could carry on well into the future here, given just some of the macro trends that are happening in the world right now. What is your investment thesis? Like at Saint Investment Group, like what are you excited about right now? What are you trying to invest in? I'd love to hear you explain.
Absolutely, yeah. We keep it pretty simple. We offer growth on one hand, and then we offer fixed income on the other. And depending on the market conditions, we focus on more on one versus the other. Right now, with inflation and with so much turbulence in the capital markets, we are ramping up because the demand is pulling us to the fixed income side. So again, I came from a turbulent, like my old business was very turbulent. It was seasonal, it was ups and downs, very profitable, but I learned very quickly that the streams of income that I built on the side are what saved me during the down periods of the business, right? So it was investing in the up periods, and it was those investments carried us during the down periods. So right now, that's what our investors have been pulling us toward. They say, hey, we want to invest in your income fund more than the growth side. We don't want risk. We don't want our money tied up for 5 years at a time. So our income fund is our 100% focus. It's 100% real estate backed. It pays out, it beats inflation, it beats the stock market, and we pay back in 90 days or less. So if you just think about that model and the environment we're in, with all this baby boomer capital moving to safer, stable investments, or the entrepreneur or high net worth community saying, hey, we're in the trenches here. We can't be taking risks. We need fixed income. We need to buy an income stream, right? That's all an income fund is, or a fixed income investment. It's buying an income stream. So that's what we've been focusing on, is offering investors a lot more flexibility. We are very clear with the fact that we beat the stock market, that we're beating inflation, because those are our biggest check boxes that our investors are wanting to see. As far as avatars around that, my first avatar is me, man. It's me, in the entrepreneur days where it's in the trenches and wanting, because I know if I could go back in time and shake myself and be like, Nick, I have the investment, you need to look at it, check this out. I know that would have been the perfect fit for me, because I could have just shoveled money at something and just said, look, consistent income, get the money back when I want, beats inflation. So all these major concerns are already checked off. I could just get back to work and focus on growing that business. And then the other side is it's those same people, but 20 or 30 years ahead. The high net worths, or the successful professionals, or the entrepreneurs 20, 30 years ahead that are saying, look, I'm entering retirement. I don't want risk. Or maybe they don't even have 5 years left. I was on a call this week with a gentleman who was 82 years old. He's like, I don't have 5 years. Are you crazy? He's like, I'm not putting my money in a 7-year fund and betting on, he's like, I'm not waiting around for that. I want something I can get out of quickly. So that's our thesis today of how we're structuring our funds and our investment opportunities. And we're going to have syndications. We average about 1 a quarter. We're going to keep that forever. But the biggest focus is trying to give our investors what they need in this market environment. And that's better service and better opportunities for the income fund we have.
And with the income fund, it sounds like it's backed by real estate. Is it essentially, are you kind of buying like performing and non-performing mortgages, or like commercial loans? Like what exactly, maybe provide a little more color on what the fixed income fund entails.
Totally. So fixed income, the income fund that we have is just the most boring, sexy real estate, consistent investments that we can find. Things that consistently pay out, right? So that's the overall thesis and goal. And then it's exactly what you said. It's performing mortgages. It's co-investing with really big groups that are already doing this, that are buying, I think one of our partners on this just purchased $200 million in performing assets from top tier banks, right? These are consistent class A, grade A investment mortgages, right? So things that are very consistent with great credit, great, loan to value. And then the other half of that is just performing properties that aren't going to go anywhere, that have 4 walls and a roof, that pay above our pref, so we know we could always make that payment. And so that's what people ask. Well, what if the market goes completely, sideways or whatever? I'm like, over a decade that we've had everything set up, we've never missed a payment to our investors ever. There's never been a preferred return that's been missed, never been a distribution that's been missed, right? And so because we invest in the most boring, which to me is sexy, the most boring, sexy investments we can, I like to co-invest with the best people we can find.
Yeah, that's terrific, man. And Nick, this conversation's been great too. I really appreciate perspectives here, on many different topics on economics and inflation, but in particular, just like really thinking big when it comes to your network. I think that's really, really powerful. So really appreciate your time here today. And if people want to follow you and what you've got going on at Sate Investment Group, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so we are constantly putting together really great information on economics, investment strategies, kind of top to bottom. I recommend our YouTube channel. And also for your listeners, I touched just the surface of the decade of inflation that we're expecting ahead. We actually put together a massive presentation with slides, with all kinds of bonuses, with extra information that we can send over to them as well, if they want to learn more about that. And then also our YouTube covers topics top to bottom that circle around investing in different strategies in the space.
Sounds awesome. Nick, again, really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Tyler, great to be here, man. Always great to hang out with you.